Marissa Holloway and Alec Grayson never expected their lives to unravel in a single night, but as they lay trapped in the wreckage of their crashed car, surrounded by Zayden Caldwell's ruthless men, they realized there was no escape. Every decision they had made, every secret they had uncovered, had led them to this moment, where survival was no longer guaranteed, and the truth they fought for might die with them. Zayden Lowell had everything a man could ask for: wealth, status, and a stunning wife who turned heads wherever she went. To those who knew him, he was the picture of success, a man who had built an empire through determination and intelligence. His towering presence commanded respect in any room he entered, his sharp suits and piercing gaze only adding to the aura of power that surrounded him. People admired him, envied him, and some even feared him, but none of them knew the man behind closed doors. Marissa Lowell played her role perfectly. She was the devoted wife, always poised, always smiling at the right moments. She had learned over the years how to maintain the illusion of happiness, how to conceal the exhaustion beneath her flawless appearance. She attended charity galas, hosted extravagant dinner parties, and stood by Zayden's side like the trophy wife everyone believed her to be. She was admired for her kindness and grace, often described as the heart of their social circle. Their friends, Alex Stanton, Olivia Morrow, and Nico Carter, saw them as the golden couple. Alec, a successful entrepreneur, had been friends with Zayden since college. Olivia, a real estate agent, had known Marissa for years and often confided in her. Nico, the most laid back of the group, thrived in the nightlife scene, always bringing energy and excitement wherever he went. The five of them formed an inseparable bond, frequently gathering for lavish dinners, weekend getaways, and exclusive events. From the outside, Zayden and Marissa's marriage seemed perfect, the kind of love story people envied, but perfection was an illusion. Behind the elegant facade, Marissa felt trapped in a life she could no longer bear. Zayden's control over her had tightened over the years, his affection turning into possession, his love into something suffocating. He dictated where she went, who she spoke to, and how she presented herself. Every moment of her life was carefully curated to fit his expectations. At first, Marissa had convinced herself that this was normal, that love sometimes meant sacrifice, but as time went on, the sacrifices became greater. Zayden's temper was unpredictable, his anger always simmering just beneath the surface. He never raised a hand against her, but his words were weapons, sharp enough to leave wounds that never healed. He reminded her constantly of what he had given her, the life of luxury, the security, the admiration of everyone around them. He made it clear that without him, she was nothing. Marissa had learned how to hide her unhappiness, how to smile through the emptiness. But no matter how hard she tried, there were cracks in the mask she wore. Olivia had started noticing them, sensing the exhaustion in Marissa's eyes, the way her laughter never quite reached her expression. Alec had seen it too, though he never voiced his concerns. Even Nico, who rarely paid attention to anything, too serious, had picked up on the shift in her demeanor. Despite the growing unease within her, Marissa still held on to hope that things could change. She had spent years building this life, convincing herself that if she played her role perfectly, she would eventually find happiness. But the truth was becoming harder to ignore. Something was missing, something she longed for but couldn't quite define. And in the quiet moments, when Zayden wasn't watching, when she was alone with her thoughts, she began to realize what it was. Freedom. Marissa wanted to be free. Free from the expectations, free from the constant pressure to be perfect, free from the invisible chains that bound her to a man who saw her as nothing more than an extension of himself. She wanted to be more than just Zayden Lowell's wife. But the more she thought about it, the more she understood that leaving him wouldn't be easy. Zayden was not the type of man to let go of something he considered his. And deep down, she knew that if she ever tried, there would be consequences. Marissa Lowell had spent years pretending, but the weight of her secrets had grown too heavy to bear. She was no longer the devoted wife who turned a blind eye to her husband's ways. She had crossed a line, and there was no going back. What had started as a desperate attempt to reclaim a piece of herself had spiraled into something far more dangerous. She was no longer just hiding an affair, she was sitting on a secret that could ruin Zayden's entire empire. It had started innocently. Enough. A late-night conversation with someone who truly listened. Someone who saw her as more than just an accessory to a powerful man. That person had been Alex Stanton, Zayden's oldest and most trusted friend. At first, Marissa had convinced herself it was harmless. They were just talking, just confiding in each other. But loneliness had a way of blurring the lines, and before she knew it, they had become entangled in something far beyond friendship. Alec had been different from Zayden in every way. Where Zayden was calculating and ruthless, Alec was warm and understanding. He had seen through the facade Marissa wore, and had been the first to truly ask if she was happy. The answer had been obvious, but saying it aloud had been terrifying. One night had turned into many stolen moments where she felt alive again, where she was reminded of who she used to be before Zayden molded her into what he wanted. But as much as Alec was an escape, Marissa knew it couldn't last. Then, she found something she was never meant to see. Zayden had always been secretive about his business, but Marissa had never questioned it. He was wealthy, successful, and influential. Those things came with shadows that were better left unexplored. But when she accidentally stumbled upon a flash drive buried in his study, curiosity had gotten the best of her. What she found changed everything. Hidden among financial records and encrypted files were undeniable traces of fraud. Money laundering, embezzlement, offshore accounts. Zayden had built his empire on a foundation of lies and deception. She wasn't just married to a controlling man. She was married to a criminal. Panic had set in instantly. She knew Zayden better than anyone, and if he ever found out she had seen these documents, he wouldn't hesitate to silence her. The logical thing would have been to destroy the flash drive and pretend she had never found it, but Marissa couldn't shake the feeling that this was her chance to finally escape. With the right leverage, she could leave him, disappear before he had the chance to retaliate. She couldn't do it alone. Desperate, she turned to Alec, Olivia, and Nico, the only people she trusted. She met them separately, carefully choosing her words, testing the waters to see how much she could reveal without putting herself in immediate danger. Their reactions were a mix of shock, concern, and fear. Olivia had urged her to be cautious, warning that a man like Zayden wouldn't go down without a fight. Nico had been more reckless, suggesting she take the evidence straight to the authorities. Alec had been the most protective, insisting they come up with a plan before making any rash decisions. They agreed that Marissa needed to gather more proof. A single flash drive might not be enough to bring Zayden down, but if she could find more, she might have a real chance at breaking free. The plan was simple: act normal, be patient, and collect as much as she could without arousing suspicion. They had no idea that Zayden was already watching, that the man they thought they were outsmarting was always 2 steps ahead. Marissa felt the paranoia creeping in, the suffocating sense that eyes were always on her. She was careful, but Zayden had built his life on control, and he had begun to notice the smallest of changes. The way she checked her phone more frequently, the hushed conversations with Alec, the slight tension in the air whenever she entered a room. He didn't have proof yet, but he could feel something shifting. Zayden had always believed in dominance, in eliminating threats before they had the chance to strike. He had built his empire by being ruthless, by ensuring that those who crossed him never had the opportunity to do it twice, and now his own wife was standing in opposition to him. Marissa thought she had time to prepare, time to escape, but Zayden had already started planning his own way to handle the situation. He just needed to uncover the full extent of her betrayal before making his move, and when he did, there would be no mercy. Marissa's plan to quietly gather more evidence was slipping through her fingers. The more she tried to act normal, the more Zayden's eyes seemed to linger on her, searching for the slightest crack in her performance. His questions became more pointed, his presence more oppressive. She could feel it in the way he lingered in the same rooms as her, the way his voice dropped to a dangerous calm whenever he spoke her name. He knew something was off, and she was running out of time. Alec, Olivia, and Nico remained her only lifeline. They had agreed to help, but even they had started to feel the pressure. Olivia had grown more paranoid, warning Marissa repeatedly that Zayden was no fool and that she needed to be careful. Nico had gone quiet, distancing himself from the situation as though he could sense the storm approaching. Only Alec remained, as steady as ever, offering reassurance that together they would find a way out. But Marissa had underestimated just how far Zayden was willing to go. One evening, when Zayden left for an unexpected business trip, Marissa saw her chance. She searched his home office with more urgency than before, her heart pounding as she dug through files and encrypted drives. She needed something undeniable, something that couldn't be erased or explained away. It wasn't just about leaving anymore. It was about surviving. She found more than she bargained for. Among the documents and financial records, there were names. People who had crossed Zayden, people who had mysteriously disappeared or suffered tragic accidents. Some of them were former employees, others business partners, and a few were nothing more than loose ends he had tied up in silence. Each name was attached to dates and locations, and the further Marissa read, the more the pieces fell into place. Zayden wasn't just a criminal, he was a murderer. The weight of her discovery made her hands tremble. She had spent years in the same house as this man, sleeping next to him, believing that his worst crimes were financial. But now she saw the truth. Zayden had built his empire with blood, eliminating anyone who threatened his power. If he ever found out that she knew, there would be no hesitation in adding her name to the list. Panicked, she contacted Alec, urging him to meet her. He arrived quickly, his concern evident as he took in the fear in her eyes. She showed him everything, and for the first time, he looked truly shaken. They had underestimated Zayden's darkness. They had assumed they could outmaneuver him, but this was a different level of danger. Alec insisted they take the evidence to the authorities immediately, but Marissa hesitated. If they made the wrong move, Zayden would know before they even had a chance to run. They needed a better plan, a way to ensure that if anything happened to them, the truth wouldn't die with them. Meanwhile, Zayden's business trip was nothing more than a test. He had left Marissa alone to see what she would do, to observe who she would reach out to, and his suspicions were confirmed. The moment Alec entered the house, Zayden's men, who had been keeping watch from a distance, reported back to him. Marissa had betrayed him, and Alec had helped her. Zayden didn't act immediately. He was patient, calculating. Instead of confronting them outright, he set his own plan in motion. Marissa thought she had the upper hand, but Zayden had spent his life dealing with traitors. He knew how to make people disappear without a trace. Alec, Olivia, and Nico were now liabilities. By the time Marissa realized the extent of her husband's reach, it was too late. One by one, they started vanishing. First, it was Nico. A car accident in the dead of night. No witnesses, no explanation. Then Olivia, who stopped answering her phone, her apartment left eerily untouched. Marissa and Alec knew what was happening. Zayden wasn't just sending a message, he was erasing them. They had underestimated the monster they were up against. And now, their only option was to run before he finished what he had started. Marissa and Alec had no time to grieve. Nico was gone, and Olivia had vanished without a trace. Every call went straight to voicemail, every text unanswered. They both knew what had happened, even if no one would say it aloud. Zayden was eliminating threats, just as he always had. Marissa felt the weight of every decision she had made crashing down on her. She had been so careful, so certain that she had control over the situation. But Zayden had been playing a different game, one she hadn't even realized she was a part of until it was too late. Alec insisted they leave town immediately, but Marissa hesitated. She still had the evidence. She still had a chance to take Zayden down. Running would only delay the inevitable. Even if they disappeared, Zayden would never stop hunting them. He had resources, connections, and an unforgiving nature that would ensure they were never truly safe. They needed a plan, something drastic. Alec had a contact, a journalist who specialized in exposing high-profile corruption cases. If they could get the evidence to her, it would be out of Zayden's hands. He couldn't kill a story that had already gone public. But getting there was the real danger. Every move they made had to be calculated, every step forward covered. Marissa packed quickly, only taking what was necessary. She tried not to think about Olivia's empty apartment or the way Nico's death had been made to look like an accident. Instead, she focused on surviving. She had spent years feeling trapped, but this was the first time she truly understood what fear felt like. Alec drove in silence, his grip on the wheel tight. The roads were quiet, the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on them. Every car that passed felt like a threat. Every moment stretched unbearably long. Marissa kept looking over her shoulder, half expecting Zayden's men to appear at any second. And then, just as they neared the outskirts of the city, the headlights appeared behind them. Marissa's heart slammed against her ribs. The black SUV was unmistakable. Zayden had found them. Alec pressed harder on the gas, weaving through the darkened streets, but the SUV stayed close, unrelenting. There was no mistaking its purpose. It wasn't following them. It was hunting them. Marissa clutched the flash, drive in her hands, knowing that if Zayden got to them, everything would be lost. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. If he caught them, they wouldn't get another chance. The chase led them onto an empty stretch of highway, the city lights fading behind them. The SUV closed in, and before Alec could react, the impact came hard and fast. The car spun violently, tires screeching as they lost control. The world tilted, metal scraping against pavement as they crashed onto the shoulder of the road. Dazed and disoriented, Marissa struggled to move. Alec groaned beside her, his face bloodied but alive. The SUV came to a stop a few feet away. The doors opened, and figures emerged, silhouettes against the dim glow of the headlights. Marissa's breath caught in her throat. She knew exactly who had come for them. Zayden had won. She clutched Alec's arm, forcing herself to move, to do something, anything. But there was nowhere left to run. The evidence she had risked everything for lay shattered on the ground. The flash drive cracked. From the impact, Zayden had been waiting for this moment, and now there was no escape. Marissa's vision blurred as she struggled to regain control of her senses. The crash had left her body battered, pain radiating through her limbs. But she couldn't focus on that now. She had bigger problems. The figures advancing toward her weren't just faceless threats. They were Zayden's men, and they had come to finish what he started. Alec groaned beside her, his face contorted in pain. He tried to move, but his injuries slowed him down. Marissa knew they had seconds at best before they were dragged from the wreckage and silenced forever. The shattered flash drive on the pavement felt like a cruel reminder of how close they had come to escaping. Now, it was all over. Zayden himself wasn't there, but his presence loomed over them, a shadow stretching into every decision they had made. His men worked quickly, yanking open the car doors, their movements efficient and practiced. This wasn't the first time they had done something like this. Marissa fought back, thrashing against the grip of the man who grabbed her. It didn't matter. He was stronger, unshaken by her resistance. A sharp pain shot through her as she was pulled from the wreckage and forced onto the cold asphalt. Alec was barely conscious, his efforts to fight back weak and uncoordinated. The night air was thick with silence, the kind that only came when death was near. Marissa's mind raced, searching for anything, any way out. But she knew how Zayden operated. He didn't leave loose ends. Then, in the distance, the faint sound of tires screeching against pavement, headlights cut through the darkness, a vehicle approaching at high speed. The men hesitated, momentarily distracted by the unexpected arrival. Marissa's heart pounded. She didn't know if it was a coincidence or fate, but she seized the opportunity. With a sudden burst of strength, she twisted out of the man's grip, ignoring the searing pain in her ribs. Alec, barely aware of what was happening, groaned as she pulled at him desperately. The approaching vehicle didn't slow down. It was coming straight for them. The men turned, momentarily thrown off guard, and then the first gunshot rang out. Marissa's breath caught as chaos erupted around her. The driver of the car, whoever they were, wasn't just passing through. They were here for a fight. More shots followed, forcing Zayden's men to scramble. The ones holding Marissa and Alec released, them reaching for their weapons. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed Alec, dragging him toward the road, away from the fight breaking out behind them. The gunfire echoed into the night, and she had no idea who was winning. All she knew was that this was their only chance. She barely processed the moment. She was pulled into the unfamiliar vehicle. Strong hands helped Alec into the back seat, and before she could even register what was happening, they were speeding away, the violence fading behind them. Marissa turned to look at their unexpected savior. It took a moment for her mind to catch up, to make sense of the familiar face behind the wheel. Olivia, alive, bruised, but determined. Marissa couldn't even speak, her body too weak to react. Olivia's eyes stayed on the road, her grip on the wheel white-knuckled. She had been in hiding, waiting for the right moment, and now she had come back for them. The drive felt endless. Every second stretched painfully, the adrenaline slowly fading into exhaustion. Eventually, the city lights reappeared, and Marissa knew they weren't stopping until they were far beyond Zayden's reach. She didn't know what the future held. She didn't know if they would ever truly be free. But one thing was clear: Zayden had underestimated them, and that mistake would cost him everything.